Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Thursday, April 25th. I was actually watching the Mets game. Mets-Dodgers. 3-2 Dodgers, bottom of the ninth. But now I'm back to CNBC, because that's what this is all about. Dow Jones was up 27 points today to 14,703. I should have said it's 4:02 p.m. Eastern Time. Dow, S&P 500 up 6, 1585. It came within a point of its all-time high of 1593. Nasdaq up 20 or 0.6% to 3289. Gold, strong rally, $40 to $14.63. Oil, 93.20, up $1.80. And the 10-year Treasury, 1.71%. Amazon just came in. Earnings beat by 10 cents, but revenues fell short, and Amazon is falling in the aftermarket. Of course, many of us cannot figure out what Amazon is all about from a valuation standpoint. Just has never made sense, but anybody trying to short it has been killed. On the corporate earnings front, this was a typical day of what we've been experiencing recently. Dow Chemical beat on the bottom line, missed on revenues, which were actually less than last year, but the stock finished up about $1.60. 3M missed on both the top and the bottom line versus expectations. Revenues overall were up just 2% versus a year ago, and the company guided lower, and 3M's shares were down about $3. ExxonMobil reported today, and it disappointed in some respects. Share price fell $1.30. Amazon is down about $4.50 in the aftermarket. Overseas, in Spain, unemployment rate, according to the nation's statistics office, is now 27.2%. 27.2%. It was 7.9% in mid-2007. Prime Minister Rajoy is unveiling new measures on Friday to restore growth and end the recession, at least he hopes. The IMF says Spain's economy will contract 1.6% in 2013. Yes, they are still building the house behind me. In the UK, the government announced GDP grew 0.3% in the first quarter, so Britain avoids a third recession or a triple dip. And in Italy, to celebrate his re-emergence as a power broker, Silvio Berlusconi traveled to the U.S. to retake his place on the world stage next to Tony Blair and President Obama at the opening of George W. Bush's presidential library. Italian President Giorgio Napolitano, of course, yesterday named or nominated a new Prime Minister, Enrico Letta, whose uncle is one of Berlusconi's closest aides, actually his right-hand man. So Berlusconi is back on top. He's going to be a major component of the new coalition. Letta has to form a cabinet, and then he needs a vote of confidence in both houses of Parliament, and that could come this weekend. Berlusconi in the polls, his center-right alliance is actually now 8 points ahead of the Democratic Party center-left coalition. That's pretty substantial in case new elections have to be held in June. And Beppe Grillo's five-star movement has been slumping, which is good. The guy's a jerk. And in South Korea, their economy grew the most in 2 years in the first quarter, 0.9% from the previous 3 months. Not bad, considering the yen's decline hurts South Korean exports. In a significant development, U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said today that American intelligence believes to some degree of varying confidence that Syria has used chemical weapons. Speaking to reporters in Abu Dhabi, Hagel said, quote, "Our intelligence community does assess with varying degrees of confidence that the Syrian regime has used chemical weapons on a small scale in Syria, specifically the chemical agent sarin. It violates every convention of warfare." In a letter to Senators Carl Levin, Lindsey Graham, and John McCain, the White House said U.S. intelligence agencies again assess with varying degrees of confidence, using the same language, that the Syrian regime has used chemical weapons. The new findings were reached by the White House in the last 24 hours, and they echo the assertions made last week by Britain and France and by the Israeli general that I noted the other day. Israeli military officials said on Tuesday that their research had also shown that Assad had used chemical weapons against rebel fighters. The letter from the White House stated, "We believe that the Assad regime maintains custody of these weapons and has demonstrated a willingness to escalate its horrific use of violence against the Syrian people. In fashioning a response to any confirmed use of chemical weapons," the letter warned, "the United States and the international community have a number of potential responses available and no option is off the table." So the Obama administration has repeatedly declared that it would not tolerate the use of chemical weapons, and Obama has called it a red line. So we'll see what happens next. Notice, though, that the administration is focusing on small-scale use so far, as clearly they're out. As a matter of fact, the main Syrian rebel group said today, after the comments were made, small scale, varying degrees of confidence. The leaders of the Free Syrian Army are certain that chemical weapons are being used in Syria, so we find this whole statement odd. That was a spokesman for the Damascus Military Council. We've noticed that the American administration only works according to its own needs. We've started to believe that there is a conspiracy in the West to support the regime in its quest to oppress the Syrian people. So that's one of the rebel spokesmen. That's not the kind of statement you want read, at least if you're from the West. In Iraq, on Tuesday and Wednesday, violence killed 125 people when security forces clashed with demonstrators in Sunni Muslim areas of the Shiite majority country. The protests have been growing over the past 4 months. Demonstrators have called for the resignation of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki and rallied against the alleged targeting of their community by the authorities. Kirkuk's deputy governor said what happened was a massacre and the situation is catastrophic and dangerous and we should work on easing the tension. One of the leading flu experts for the World Health Organization said of the Chinese bird flu H7N9, this is definitely one of the most lethal influenza viruses we have seen so far. Death toll is 22 last I saw out of 108 confirmed cases. Keiji Fukuda said, "We think this virus is more transmissible to humans than H5N1, which was the SARS strain, if I recall correctly. When we look at influenza viruses, this is an unusually dangerous virus." The World Health Organization said the likely source of infection was poultry, as chickens, ducks, and pigeons from poultry markets had tested positive. Previously, experts have said the animal reservoir, so to speak, appeared to be unspecified birds. Chinese health officials have acknowledged so-called family clusters where members of a single family have become infected, but have so far declined to put it down to human transmissions. South Korea on Thursday warned of unspecified grave measures if North Korea rejects talks on a jointly run factory park. Kaesong, shuttered for nearly a month now, man, time flies, setting up the possible end of the last remaining major symbol of inter-Korean cooperation. Pyongyang withdrew the 53,000 North Koreans working at Kaesong, which was stupid. At the factory itself, remember this whole complex has about 123 South Korean companies. Food has been dwindling. Pyongyang has not forced the South Koreans still there to leave. There are only about 175, but of course these companies are going out of business. And finally, on flying, editorial, Wall Street Journal, on the FAA and the sequester. Start with the Federal Aviation Administration, better known as the Postal Service without the modern technology. Flyers directly fund 2/3 of the FAA's budget through 17 airline taxes and fees, about 20% of the cost of a $300 domestic ticket, up from 7% in the 1970s. Yet now, the White House wants to make this agency that can't deliver what passengers are supposedly paying for even more dysfunctional. Ponder this logic, if that's the right word. The sequester cuts about $637 million from the FAA, which is less than 4% of its $15.9 billion 2012 budget, and it limits the agency to what it spent in 2010. The White House decided to translate this 4% cut that it has the legal discretion to avoid into a 10% cut for air traffic controllers. Though controllers will be furloughed for 1 of every 10 working days, 4 of every 10 flights won't arrive on time. The White House claims the sequester applies to the budget category known as projects, programs, and activities, and thus it lacks flexibility. Not so. This is a political pose to make the sequester more disruptive. Legally speaking, the sequester applies at a more general level known as accounts. The air traffic account includes 15,000 controllers out of 31,000 employees. The White House could keep the controllers on duty simply by allocating more furlough days to these other non-essential workers. And of course, this is boomeranging on the White House in a big way. I love this passage from an article in New Jersey's Star Ledger. Cindy Hollingsworth, who had a layover in Newark on her trip from Richmond, Virginia to San Francisco, said she was surprised at how vocal her flight attendant had been this morning on the subject of sequestration. She went up and down the aisle, reminding everyone that if they voted for Obama, this was the result, said Hollingsworth, who declined to name the airline. I don't want to get that girl in trouble. That's all for this week. I do Week in Review on Friday, posted by Saturday morning. So check it out at stocksnews.com. Have a great weekend. Take care.